welcome to Sports Break, the podcast. I am super excited to have Derek Helling on today. Derek is a lead writer for PlayUSA and Catena Media. He broke into covering the legal U.S. gambling industry in North America in 2018, and he focuses on reporting breaking news in addition to legislation and litigation happening in the industry, which is all very important when you talk about an industry that is growing. So Derek, so excited to talk with you about that and more. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am very much a fan of what She Plays does in terms of gamifying the games of women's sports, and have participated myself in several of your fantasy contests. So this is wonderful.
Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. And for any listeners, you should know that Derek is rocking a Chicago Sky hat, and we are loving it. So in the thick of the playoffs right now.
Yes. Hopefully that expands beyond tonight. If you're listening to this later, we are recording on the day before Game 5 of the Sky Sun series. So perhaps by the time you listen, you will know the outcome of that game. If so, do not travel back in time and appear before me and tell me now, because I'm looking forward to watching, regardless of the outcome.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great game. Well, I would love for folks to hear a little bit more from you about, what you do currently. And we'll get into, how you got into that. But what do you do in the sports betting world? Because I do feel like it's still a new industry for a lot of people, because every, year new states are getting it. So tell a little bit more about what you do, please.
Well, kind of like my bio mentioned, starting in 2018, I started covering the legal gambling industry in this country, and that's mostly because a very significant event in the history of legal gambling in this country occurred in 2018. That was the year that the United States Supreme Court overturned the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, also known as PASPA, that has opened the door for individual states to legalize sports betting within their borders. And so that, as you said, it led to a cavalcade of states doing exactly that in various different forms to this day, and it's still happening right now. Kansas just launched last week. We're still anticipating a launch of online betting in Maryland coming sometime soon. In-person wagering right now available. Other states that might legalize in the near future include Missouri and Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, and California. So that's all very much a matter of interest to me right now, as I cover the legislation across the country in this regard. That's mostly what I do. And in addition to covering the multitude of lawsuits that inevitably stream out of those laws getting enacted, because different people have different interests in that. And the United States of America pretty much allows anyone to sue anyone for anything, for better or for worse. There are some punishments if you file a meritless lawsuit, but that bar is kind of low for what the court will at least take your money for and let you file a brief over. So yeah, that's the long and short of what I do.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I think, some people hear sports betting and they immediately are like, "Ooh, no. There's lots of stigma around it." There are safe ways to do it, absolutely.
Yes.
A lot of people in the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association, Trade Association, are leading the way in that. What on the industry side would you say, for the women's sports industry, let's say, what could sports betting do as that continues to grow that represents women's sports?
If you're, an NWSL club, an WNBA franchise, if you're Athletes Unlimited, Even if you're a college athletic department, to some degree, that brings up some other issues because a lot of the people playing on those teams are underage in terms of legal gambling standards in a lot of these places. But it is an engagement tool for your fans. For a lot of men's sports teams, women's sports teams have not embraced it to the same extent so far. It's a new form of revenue in terms of sponsorships. The Phoenix Mercury have a deal with Bally. So far, they are the only WNBA franchise that has formed such a partnership. None of the NWSL clubs have gone there yet. I don't understand why, because in a lot of these jurisdictions where they play their home games, it's completely legal and available on the matches that they're playing as well. And on top of that, a lot of the content about sports that we are seeing now and we're going to continue to see is going to have either a complete sports betting focus or at least incorporate that angle to it. So I think that continuing to keep it as at arm's length out of a stigma and to some degree a very legitimate and understandable caution is going to become an increasingly difficult position as these leagues and games continue to become more mainstream and more commercialized.
Yeah. When we've seen what fantasy has done for men's leagues across the last decade, 2 decades. We're seeing what sports betting can also do in men's leagues. Yeah. And so, that's, the reason we are trying to get fantasy sports going is the engagement that just skyrockets because people just for fantasy, but then when you factor in they're spending their money and wagering their money, they want to see the outcome immediately. So it does drive people to, want to see live sports as much as they can. So hoping we are moving into that frontier. So it's exciting it must be exciting for you to like really have, your finger on the pulse of like where it's moving. I know California would be a big opening if it comes. So that's super exciting. So how did you get into this space? Have you always been interested in sports and just law and sports combined or?
Really, it just happened to kind of just through networking and making connections through people. I had been producing some more traditional sports content from a business and legal angle. And then as I built up my portfolio of that, the company that I now work for contacted me to do some freelancing for them. And I, just through writing about it and researching, have learned everything because, 4 years ago, I was pretty green in terms of having a working knowledge of how legal gambling in this country works. And I've said many times to other people that when you work as a journalist or a content creator, you do a lot more reading than you ever did during when you were in college, just through the course of doing your job. So I mean, that was essentially how it happened, is just making connections with the right people, and the rest has become history, so to speak.
That's awesome. Did you play sports growing up?
I grew up in the far southeast corner of Iowa.
Okay.
And in a rural area. And so of course American football was one of the bigger sports. Wrestling is actually the most popular sport in Iowa. I would say it's even more popular than American football.
Wow.
But I remember going to a wrestling meet as a young child and seeing a wrestler with the cauliflower ear.
Mm-hmm.
Was the first wrestler I saw take the mat, and that did me in for wrestling. I had no interest after that point. So I played basketball during the winter because that was your other option.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, did little league baseball for a few years. Wasn't very good. Not that I was not that great in the other sports, but did not hold my interest as like you know, and I wasn't any good. It was just something that I did because I had the time. My friends were doing it. That was really it. So yeah,
it was a big community builder. You're right. Were you fans? Did your family support a team altogether, or what about?
Not really gung ho. I would say that my father was a sports fan, is a sports fan. But growing up in Southeast Iowa, it's 3 hours to St. Louis.
Yeah.
4 hours here to Chicago, where I now live. So it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to go to a game professionally. Anyways, we were about 2 hours from Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is, where I went to school. So we would get up there for the occasional American football or basketball game. But yeah, that's about it.
And now Chicago, are you fully in all the pro teams there? So many of them.
I mean, I would say that I've been a Sky season ticket holder. I've been a Red Stars season ticket holder.
Love to hear it. Yes.
And outside of that, I'm pretty indifferent.
I love it. I love it.
Not that I dislike the Bears or the White Sox or the Cubs or the NHL team or the Fire. I don't have anything against them. I just don't care.
Yeah.
What
is it about women's sports that you love?
Well, I think it's number one, it's the intrigue of watching something develop in front of my eyes. That kind of intrigues me to just kind of watch this become bigger than it has been. There's also an element of, as a cisgender white man, of using the privilege that I have to benefit people who do not enjoy that privilege in our society. And supporting women's sports is one way to do that. That's why I recommend all other people like me, even if you don't care about what happens on the pitch or the court, which to a large extent I don't. I mean, it's not, if the Sky win tonight, I'm not going to be devastated. I'm going to be like, this is a good season. They were one game away from going back to the finals, and I'm going to go to bed and get back up for work tomorrow morning, regardless. But, I mean, and it's a great tool for socialization and making friends.
Yeah.
The people who are active supporters of women's sports are some of the best people you will ever meet. Hanging out at pre or post game events for them has been an extremely superior experience to like tailgates I have been to for men's sports. And I think it's just because a lot of to put it succinctly, a lot of the biggest douchebags in our society aren't going to women's sporting events. So it's a kind of a natural filtration in that regard. I don't know if that will always be the case.
Filtration, I love it.
Yeah, I don't know if that will always be the case, but I mean, because as it becomes more popular and more mainstream, I guess that's kind of kind of what you lose in that regard.
Sure.
But there's a give and take to it. So
yeah. But I mean, I think you're right. I think that's really cool to hear you say, even as the culture that surrounds it of the fandom is different. There's something different about it. And I do think there are some like loyal, diehard, won't be able to sleep tonight, right? If the Sky loses. But also there's so many folks that are like, just celebrating that this is good for the sport and this is good for
Mhm.
visibility. And there's so many like good, bigger picture things. So it's different. It is a unique space to be in and to be a fan
Yes.
alongside of other people. It's very cool to hear you say that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely. I've made some really good friends through the community. So if nothing else, I've gotten that from it. And in that regard, it's been worth every penny that I've spent.
That's awesome. Just
Yeah.
wondering your quick thoughts. Chicago Red Stars. Is it
Mhm.
really hard to get to the stadium? Do you wish it was closer in town? Is it even possible one day? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it is if you live in the city, and not in the burbs, it can be a challenge because a lot of people like me who live in the actual city don't have cars.
Hmm.
And so we rely on either friends or the Red Stars done have formed partnerships to get party buses going that can take people to and from SeatGeek Stadium.
Hmm.
And kind of a downside of that is, I mean, it's cheap, it's available. The kind of downside to that is you don't necessarily get to spend all the pre and post game time that you would
Hmm.
like,
True.
because I mean it's there, it's leaving. I mean that's your ride home unless you want to spend $80 on an Uber,
Yeah.
um, but or public transportation, which is available, but from where I live to get out to SeatGeek would probably just using the buses or the L would probably take almost 2 hours.
Wow. That's pretty
So
far.
in that regard, it's not ideal. But so I would say, yeah, if you don't have a car, it is hard. It is not the most convenient thing. The Red Stars acknowledge that. They,
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why they formed the partnerships with the buses. And I think that if you were to talk to some of their executives off the record, and in a candid way, that they would express that they would love
Yeah.
to get out of SeatGeek Stadium and get into a place that's more central. And secretly, well, not secretly, I guess perhaps this may not be in a popular opinion among people in Chicago, is I would love to see the Bears move out to Arlington and the Red Stars join the
Oh,
fire in Soldier Field. Selfishly, I could walk to Soldier Field in 10 minutes from where I
okay.
live. So that would be extremely convenient for me.
There you go.
Um, but public transportation options for people who live in other parts of the city would be extremely more feasible were that to happen.
Yeah.
So last week when the Bears unveiled their plans for a prospective home in Arlington, I was like, you let me know when you guys are ready to move. I'll come and help. What you need me to carry. I'll help you pack whatever you guys need me to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah. I do hope,
Yeah.
because I know Washington Spirit had the same thing where they played in a small town in Maryland and it was just hard to get transportation from the
Mhm.
big city of, the DC
Yeah.
area. And so I am hoping there's more of a move in to, where it's easy to just even walk by and be like, oh, there's a game, let's go, kind of
Yeah.
thing. So
Absolutely.
that would be huge. We'll just curious, as far as women's sports world and sports
Mhm.
sporting world, what do you hope continues to change in the next 5 years for both?
Um, Next 5 years, I would say that number one, first and foremost, concern and hope when it comes to legalized sports betting is that the investment on the part of the regulatory bodies in the states, the sports books themselves, and women's sports teams that become involved, like the Mercury, are that they continue to and expand their investment into responsible gambling.
Yeah.
That's the first and foremost concern that you always have to discuss when it comes to sports betting, because it is a form of gambling. And for some people, that's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Gambling addiction is very real concern. And so that's got to be something that we address first and foremost. And then also educating people about the legal options that exist when they become available in their areas, and explaining to them why this is a better way. Even though the illegal channels exist, why this is a better way. And there's numerous reasons why. And then after all that, I would love to see more of the women's sports teams follow the Mercury's lead and take advantage of the opportunities that they're currently pissing away. This, you can stick your head in the sand over this and pretend that your fans aren't betting on your matches or your games, and pretend that that your players are just up to speed on everything that they need to be aware of with this going on.
Yeah.
And leave it all to chance. Or you can take an active role, get the sponsorship dollars that you should be getting already, and make sure that your players are aware of what they need to be observing as far as protecting the integrity of the contests go. Because I think it's a dangerous thing to assume that they just know. Yeah,
that's very true.
So that goes back into the other, and I would love to see this become legal and available in all 50 states.
Yeah.
I don't know if that will ever happen. I don't know if I ever see Utah or Idaho ever legalizing. So that may be a hope that's never going to be fulfilled. But yeah, otherwise, there's just so many reasons to make this legal and available. And I think it's foolish to not act on the opportunity.
Yeah, I know from our standpoint for fantasy, a big lack of investment has existed regarding stats for women's sports. It's really hard to find good player, like individual player statistics. And so I'm hoping even like the sports books start bumping up the odds that they're making, where you could get down to like the nitty gritty. Oh, what's going to happen on this play? Like in play betting even.
There's some initiative in that regard. There's a company, and the name escapes me right now, but they have been working on delivering just exactly what you talked about for WNBA and women's college basketball.
Amazing.
2 sports books, so that, because player props at a lot of these legal books have been few and far between for women's sports. Like if you go onto the log on the DraftKings or FanDuel sports books for an average NWSL match, you're not going to find any.
Right.
Like you can't go onto these books and bet on whether Ashley Hatch is going to score a goal in the match.
Right.
Because sports books don't have an infinite number of employees that they can send out to every competition that's going on over the world to report on what's happening for them. They depend on third parties to provide that data to them. And to this point, a lot of the infrastructure and the investment for women's sporting events has not been on the level as men's.
Yeah.
That's starting to change. It's going to take a lot more work, both on the providers side and the side of the venues and the teams that own the facilities where these events are played, to provide the necessary infrastructure to be able to do that. So I think it's coming. It's just not here right now.
Yeah.
To the extent that I would like to see it.
Yeah. Well, as you said, hopefully in the next 5 years, it happens and it surpasses what we're even envisioning.
Yeah,
So that would be amazing.
it would be beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Can you tell folks where they can find you and find your writing and follow for all the latest happenings?
Yeah. My writing on the gambling industry is available at PlayUSA.com. I'm not much of a social media person. So that is pretty much non-existent. And I mean, I've got a LinkedIn, but I'm on there probably like once a week for just like 2 minutes. That's really it. So yeah, I would say PlayUSA would be the best spot.
Great. Well, we will put that link in the show notes. And just thanks again for your time and best of luck to the Sky tonight or tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And no, it's tonight, right?
It's tonight.
Yeah, tonight. And yeah, hopefully maybe we could have you on in a year and see where things are at in a year. I would love that. Okay.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.